body of the 5th of December. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Can I first ask members to appoint a chairman for the meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Could I nominate my colleague Andy Ferguson to be chair?
Thanks, Andy.
I'll second.
Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome everybody to the meeting today. Tracy, can we confirm the Sederunt, please? And any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm all 5 members are present.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? John?
Yeah, it's on item 5. There's a colleague from the group that we're all aware of, but no discussions have taken place or anything.
John?
Yes, a similar declaration, Chair.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Tracy, Clerk, can you take us through the review body, through the documents and papers for the meeting?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that there are 2 notices for review at consideration at this meeting. Item 4, 4 Balcarry Holdings, Glenluce, refusal of planning permission for alterations, extension and change of use of farmsteading to form dwelling house, reference 180063 FUL. Within your papers you have your notice of review, the report on handling, observations of the appointed officer, comments of the applicant's agent, the planning application form, decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts of the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan and photos of the application site. The grounds for refusal are that the proposal is contrary to the provisions of Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan Policy OP2 and supplementary guidance on conversion of traditional agricultural properties, and that the design of the proposal, which includes significant raising of the eaves of the original building, is not considered sympathetic to character and appearance of the existing agricultural building. The applicant has requested that this review be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notice of review are, in summary: 1. Every planning application should be considered on its own merits, but it should also be transparent throughout the region when making decisions, but this has not been the case. The planning officer has not given consideration to the adjoining 2-storey building, thus the surrounding cluster of mixed-use buildings. 2. If this application is approved, both a bat and barn owl survey and structural survey will be undertaken and submitted. The planning officer does not mention from email communication that a structural survey will be undertaken once planning permission has been approved and will form part of the building warrant application. The planning officer further states in the report on handling that, although neglected for some time, the building did not appear to have any significant defects, and as a building of traditional construction and formed with close association with the adjacent farm buildings, the proposed site is certainly considered worthy of retention. 3. At 4.9 of the report on handling, the planning officer does not mention the adjoining 2-storey buildings, thus the surrounding cluster of mixed-use buildings. The proposal to increase the eaves of the single-storey building by 1.3 metre would still be 1 metre lower than the mid-floor of the adjoining 2-storey building. In response to 4.11 on the report on handling, page 29 of the supplementary guidance on conversion of traditional agricultural buildings shows guidance pictures which are of individual isolated buildings. None of the guidance pictures examples relate to the proposed application, as the proposal adjoins a 2-storey building with eaves and ridge height significantly lower and also of gable end construction. The raising of eaves proposed is sympathetic to the adjoining building and surrounding buildings. The delegated report does not mention a lot of points relevant to this application. It is impaired and misleading. Since the introduction of the latest local development plan, many other conversions of farm buildings have been approved by the Dumfries and Galloway Planning Department, and the following are but a few of many to mention. Reference 171720 FUL at Ayr Hemming Farm, Glenluce, reference 16P2-0134 at Lagan Gatehouse of Fleet, and reference 15P4-0202 at Kinnelside Farm, Lockerbie. Support the need for planning control, but believe it must be consistent and fair, judged on its own individual merit, but unfortunately for some reason or other, this has not been the case, and sincerely trust members of the local review body will agree with our reasoning and retrospectively approve this planning application. The applicant has also provided comments relative to the case. You also have your further comments by interested parties, a list of your development plan policies. So the main issues for the local review body to consider is, does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies? In particular, does the principle of the development accord with the terms of policy H3 and the related supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside and the conversion of a traditional agricultural property? Is a structural survey required to establish the acceptability of the host building in principle? Does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies relating to site and design of this type of development? For example, local development plan policies OP1, OP2 and supplementary guidance documents, design quality of new development, housing in the countryside and conversion of traditional agricultural properties. Fundamentally, is the proposal sympathetic to the character and appearance of the existing agricultural building? If the proposal is considered not to conform with the relevant development plan policies and adopted supplementary guidance, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? Having outlined the documents within your papers, it now falls to the local review body to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that no representations from any party will be heard today. The options available to the local review body for this and the following case today are that it can decide it has sufficient information before it to enable it to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations. The local review body would be required to state precisely the information it is seeking and who must provide it, resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who will be invited to speak and on what matters, or resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied. This can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. If the local review body resolves that it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has the powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement on the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. A planning advisor is present at your meeting. He is here to assist for both items. It is confirmed that he has not had any involvement in the cases and was not the case officer or appointed officer for either of the applications. He is purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process to the local review body. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I will ask the Chairman now to lead the debate and in the first instance to lead the local review body through the agenda papers together and decide if it has sufficient information before it to make a determination today.
Thanks, Clark. I think we normally go through page by page, don't we, for any questions? Am I right? So,
I can give you slides as well.
And slides as well. You want to go to the slides just now?
Yep. Could we put on the projector, please?
John?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm kind of looking for a bit of clarity on page 15, where the applicant and the agent said that they attached the agent statement, applicant statement, and 7 letters of support. I received the email from David, although I agree with his statement that the process for submitting comments on notices of review is only available to interested parties who are defined as parties who submitted representations at the appropriate time during the consideration of the original application. However,
John, that'll come in after the slides. Because
I don't think we've got enough information here to
we're not at that
make a
stage yet
decision.
because we've no reviewed it yet. we have to go through all the pages. Once that's there and it's in, that's when you ask the question?
Well,
Maybe
going by
rather
the
before.
review procedure on page 14, the local review body will decide if it has sufficient information to determine and the review without further representation or procedure on the day of the committee meeting. So, acting on that statement there, I don't think we have got sufficient enough information.
Well, we normally go through that section, and if that would be the time you would raise that, not now. So, in terms of the process, the normal process is we would get the slides first, then we would start going through the index of context, from page 11 to page 26, and that's when you raise it in there. So, without cutting across you, but I think that's actually the protocol we usually follow, and that is the right time to do it. Okay.
That may be so, but I mean, the information I had to get off the internet myself, I think these papers should be in the document
John, I've
itself.
made the ruling. Okay.
Okay, Chair, sorry, this is just, these are the same photos that you have in your agenda papers, but obviously just a little larger. View from the site, looking west out over Luce Bay, looking north up to one of the other Stedding holding buildings, and down through to the southeast. You're just seeing the edge. That's the end gable of the application site. Looking down through the rest of the site where it will be over to this side that the Stedding application site is. This is the application site here to the rear. This is in separate ownership and not part of the application site. That's looking at the end gable, and the site where the extension would go on is here. That would be the front elevation, and as been mentioned in the report, there is a 2-storey existing steading next door. And then that's just the full front elevation of it.
Okay, so we normally move forward into one, the notice of review dated the 10th of August and received. That's pages 11 to 26. That's where you come in, John, if you're wanting to raise a point.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just clarification, as I said, about the support of the 7 letters. What is annoying me, although I agree with David Sutty's report, well, his email that was sent out to us, but he acknowledged that there was an email sent out to the agent and the applicant. Now, if that's the email which was the attachment on David's email, then that should have been part of these documents to explain the reasons why these 7 letters cannot be considered. Now, if these documents or these letters or these emails or anything else that's not being attached to the actual whole document that we're here to debate, it's a bit unreasonable to make a decision when we're not getting this information. And I'll wait until, if you want to go to, because I've got the same issue again when we get to section 3, which is the observations of the appointed officers. I think there should be information in there as well, but if you want to deal with number 1 on the list, I would like clarification on that, please. Why information is not being attached to the documents, but we're getting it sent as an attachment in an email.
David?
Well, as I understand it, basically what you're referring to is from the local review body administration that was sent out on the 17th of August. That's a purely administrative email, just in the same way that you don't get all the acknowledgement letters or correspondence that is sent out in the pack. So that isn't actually when you have a submission of new information, it is open to the LRB to decide whether or not they wish to accept that. Now, clearly all members have got a copy of that and have seen it, but the admin side of things had, at the outset, considered that it wasn't admissible for the reasons set out in the letter.
So, John, you went back in?
Yeah, please. I understand what you're saying, but the point is, it's already in the first few pages of this document where it says, please see the attachment 7 in number of letters of support, and the only reference that you've given was the attachment which we had to download off the internet, explaining why. Now, if it's already in the documents, there should be an explanation. This explanation should have been in these papers to clarify that point that I was trying to make, and it wasn't. So it's missing information that should have been in this document.
Where do we go with this?
I can feed that information on your behalf back to the local review body administration, but obviously I'm not involved with the local review body administration. You have those documents, therefore it is open to yourselves today to decide whether or not this new information is something that you wish to accept. But obviously the guidance from the Scottish Government on how to deal with local review bodies is clearly on the lines that it has to be in exceptional circumstances that late new information is to be considered.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the new information, I'm talking about the attachment from the officer to explain why those 7 letters, that piece of information wasn't in this document. The clarification part.
Again, I can feed that back to the administration section and ask that they take note of that for future.
I think the only reasonable way we can deal with this is actually go through the process, note everything that's getting said here, and at the end of the day, the 5 members make a decision based on what they think is the proper outcome. And I think the issue about the letters of support not being in here is an issue actually for outside this chamber today. But it was noted on the 13th of August, which is some time ago, that the applicant and actually is referring to them in his in this notice of review. So I think what we should do is actually go through this, because I'm no minded. I don't think the will of the 5 of us would be to actually put this off to bring it back so that we've got these letters here when we've already received copies of the letter from the applicant or the appellant. So for me, I actually think that's probably the best way forward.
My issue is not with the 7 letters, my issue is with the appropriate officer sending the reasons why they weren't accepted wasn't in these documents. This part is what I'm on about, not the 7 letters. I've disregarded that completely. This is the part that should have been in the document.
That's absolutely right, but we'll come to a part of the process later when we've got enough information to make a decision. At that stage, it'll kick in. If we feel we haven't, then obviously it's a different matter. If we feel we have, then we'll deal with it on the day. And I think we need to go through that whole process to make sure we're absolutely clear on what decision we're making with the best information we've got in front of us today. And that really is a matter, I would suggest, for outside here. It might be something that we might want to refer back to the Standing Orders Committee, for example. There's a number of avenues available for us to actually remedy that. And one, of course, is for David to take it back to the team and say we need that information, or the fullest information, if that's way members feel at that time. So, other than that, have we any other questions on pages 11 to 26? Ian?
Yes, it's on pages 18 and 19 in particular, under the section of where it goes wrong. It gives you various examples of applications that would not be appropriate, and some are very obvious. It does, however, give one that says a wrap-round extension. The clarification of this, I think the only objection in this particular case is the wrap-round extension, not the ridge height of the adjoining building.
I would like to have a census of all the farm buildings in Dumfries and Galloway if that was the case, but David, you any comment on that?
really just to refer members to the reason which the appointed officer actually refused the application on, which does specifically state that the design of the proposal, which includes significant raising of the eaves of the original building, is not considered sympathetic to character and appearance of the existing agricultural building. So it's not really the wraparound, it is specifically mentioned in the appointed officer's reason for refusal.
Happy
Yeah,
in?
sorry, I maybe didn't explain that well enough. It's more the fact that particular the diagram, the 6 examples, I should say, are merely examples and do not relate anything to this particular application, because none of them are similar to this application, other than the wraparound extension, but the adjoining ridge height is not mentioned at all.
David?
Well, actually it is. If you look at the first, just where you've got the cross, where it goes wrong, and then there's 3 bullet points under that, the roof height has been raised by building up the eaves, fundamentally altering original proportions. So that is specifically mentioned.
Ian?
I think I see what you mean. It's not clear from the diagram, but thank you.
Okay. John Young?
Thank you, Chair. It's probably my lack of understanding of English that's the problem here. At the very top of page 19, it says amendments were sought after it was considered the original submission was somewhat unsuccessful. And at the bottom of page 18, it talks about the adjoining 2-storey building had previously had approval. So what is the original submission that is mentioned at the top of page 19? What was this original submission?
There was an original submission which came with the application, which was slightly different to the current proposal, the one that was actually refused. For example, it had slightly more glazing in the roof. It had a raising of the wall head height by 1.5 metres. That was reduced to 1.3. So there was a scheme that came in initially that were amended drawings. Those are all online as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to keep saying David. I think just answer the questions, David. That'll be a lot easier because I'm only here to chair the meeting, not answer the questions. So are we happy then with pages 11 to 26? That's one. No more questions? Okay, so in that case we'll move on to 2, which is the report on handling and related correspondence, pages 27 to 40. Have we any questions on that? John again.
Thank you, Chair. Just maybe a wee bit of clarification, but my understanding on page 31, when it says policy H3, states that the council will support housing proposals in the countryside where the proposals meet one or more of the following. Now, it does meet one because it's converting an existing building, and at the end of the report, the case officer's report, 4.19, it says the proposal fails to comply with the local development policy H3. Well, that's their interpretation. My interpretation is completely different. But then when you go to see what the actual response from Steve Rogers is, he mentions nothing about fails to comply with H3. He only says that the reasons for refusal was on the grounds of the local development plan policy OP2 in his letter to the applicant agent. So the case officer saying one thing and Steve Rogers is saying another. I'm kind of getting confused about who's right, who's wrong, what's right, what's wrong.
Chair, yes, funnily enough, I had spotted that on page 34 as well and put a highlighter through it. paragraph 419, I think that is an error there, or perhaps even a cut and paste from another report, I don't know, but it is clearly wrong for that case officer to have said, to refer to H3, because the reasons that go on following immediately under that don't make any reference to H3, it's OP2 and the supplementary guidance. Very technically, the supplementary guidance on the conversion of traditional agricultural properties is related to H3. So it is, it's part of the statutory development plan because it's statutory supplementary guidance. But I would agree that I think that is an incorrect summary in 419.
Thank you, Chair. Page 32, the bottom 410 and 411, the application included UPVC windows, and they were requested to consider a change, but the change wasn't made. Why wasn't that also part of the reasons for the refusal?
Again, I think just what was in the mind of the appointed officer, if you look at the actual reason for refusal, it says the design of the proposal then mentions which includes significant raising of the eaves. So it doesn't exclude all the other things. It's listing one thing in particular, but design is not considered sympathetic to the character and appearance of the existing agricultural building is the reason for refusal, which could include those things. It's not specifically mentioned.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then we'll go on to 3 observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review. That's on page 41 to 45.
Thank you, Chair. Page 43, the paragraph 3, where the applicant states the designs was amended to the recommendations made by the officer, but the statement, however, the appellant dismissed the majority of the design solutions suggested by the planning officer. Now, that's a statement. I don't know what the majority of the design solutions were. There's no reference in here. There's no papers to say what design solutions and were they unreasonable, which goes back to my first statement. Are we getting sufficient enough information here to make a decision today? So I would like a bit of clarity or an explanation of why we aren't getting the papers we need to make a decision on.
Again, I'm not here to defend anything like that, but I certainly can advise that what you are looking at is the actual decision that was refused. So to a large degree, whatever discussions took place and what originally came in is largely irrelevant because it was the decision that was made on the drawings which are in your papers, and it's that alone that you actually need to be referring yourself to.
Okay, John.
Thank you. Yeah, I could agree with that, but I mean, how much weight do I put on the officer in refusing this when I don't know what the design solutions were talked about? And I'm sorry, Chair, but I'll have to jump the gun into page 49 because we have the meeting that was arranged with the officer, Iona Brooke, and the applicant agent is saying that all amendments were duly undertaken as per the planning officer's request, thus confirmed in an email communication. Again, we haven't seen sight of this email. So how much weight do I put on the officer, or how much weight do I put on the applicant in these two situations when I haven't got documents or anything to refer to these in front of me to make that decision?
I think I'm going to give the same answer as when we come to have we got sufficient evidence. Are we happy to move somewhere, and that would come in there, because we could go all the way through some of these papers and come up with the same arguments. At the end of the day, it'll be a vote of the 5, There are ways to remedy this, absolutely. I think it's not lost on David, some of the comments being made. And I'll come back to you, so we can leave that just now and come back to it. Doesn't mean to say I'm disregarding it, but we can come back to it. Ian first and then John Young.
Thank you, Chairman. It's page 43 again. It's paragraph 4, and it's also mentioned in other parts. It makes quite a lot of reference to the absence of a BAT and oil survey and also a structural survey. And yet I understand from the report that the applicant has said that these surveys will be carried out should planning permission be given. Just asking David, would that be in order? Could that be as part of a planning condition or conditions to any award of a planning application?
Chair, I noticed that whilst no surveys for either matter were submitted with the application, and you are supposed to be reviewing the decision made by the appointed officer with information at that time, within the next section where the applicant's agent has submitted further comments, I notice in there has been attached a barn owl and bat survey. So that is technically new information, which again, you have to decide whether or not you wish to accept that. It wasn't something which was before the appointed officer when he made his decision. The issue of the structural survey, as far as I can see, that's never been submitted. I would suggest that it is probably not appropriate to have that as a condition, for the simple reason is that you, in order to satisfy yourselves that it complies with your policies, is that building capable of being converted? I mean, we obviously have it on the slide there. It's not an absolute ruinous condition, but there are extra loadings going to be going on to the wall heads as a result of the proposed additional floor. We don't know what the footings are, the foundations in there. So in most instances, you would be actually looking at before granting planning permission, just to satisfy yourself that it is actually going to be okay. So you do have the bat and barn owl survey, which as far as I can see gives it a clean bill of health, although that wasn't before the appointed officer. The structural survey has not been submitted, and I would suggest that it's not appropriate to actually be getting that dealt with by condition, because if you've granted a permission and then you find that subsequently it isn't capable of being converted, you've actually, well, it's tantamount to a refusal. They've got a permission they can't implement.
Yeah, I think I follow that. Is that not normally covered by the building warrant application anyway?
No, it's actually alluded to in the report there as well. It is a matter of fact and degree where case officers will look at each site, but where there's any doubt, then it's not a blanket requirement for a structural survey. If a building is very obviously in very good condition, then it's probably unnecessary. But it's at very least it's best practice for a structural survey to be required to accompany a planning application to allow an assessment to be made as to whether or not it is capable of being converted. Perhaps jumping the gun, but if you were minded to support this application, I would suggest what you couldn't do is attach a condition, but what you could do is move to further procedures, which you would then require the applicant or an agent to submit a structural survey to allow you to actually see if it is capable of being converted, because at the moment, nobody knows that.
Okay. Anyone else? John?
Thank you, Chair. Again, on page 43, paragraph 2 talks about conversion proposals are assessed against Dumfries and Galloway's LDP, as we all know. But I would just like to draw the attention on page 173, as part of the approach, it says, it is important to develop an appraisal process which is proportionate to the importance of the property. Not every group of farm buildings will require the same level of investigation and analysis. And I think that should be borne in mind when considering this particular item. Thank you.
Okay, we can discuss that when we go into session, I would suggest. I think that was more a statement than a question, wasn't it? Yeah. Have anything else on pages 41 to 45? No. In that case, we'll go into 4 comments on applicants, agents and observations of the appointed officer, and on further comments from third parties, pages 47 to 53. Have you any questions? Are you just got to park that for later, John? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Anyone else? The only thing I would say, of course, is that we've got the barn and owl, the bat and owl survey, sorry, it's there. So that's included in the considerations today. So that's one of the things. Has anybody else got any questions before? Ronnie?
Just a little clarification here, actually, on the heights on the first floor of the planned development here. Could maybe David just highlight the height of the ceiling height from the floor height from the ceiling height on the first floor? What is the minimum standards on that?
There's no planning requirement on that. There is a building standards requirement in terms of the clearance as you go up the stairs, which from memory I think is 2 metres, but I would need to check that.
Sorry, Ian. Yeah.
I was just reminding you to put your mic on.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm a bit slow getting older, you know. So we're going to item 5 now then. Planning application form submitted on the 17th of January 2018, associated plans and supporting information. That's 55 to 68. Have we any questions on that? Nope. Okay, thank you. In that case, then we'll move on to 6, which is the decision letter from the Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 31st of May. That's pages 69 to 75. Any questions on that? John?
Yeah, just the reference that David's cleared up. You know, there was no mention of H3. You know, refusal through H3, just in Steve Rogers' letter. I'm actually not sure where we go with that, because we're reviewing what's been refused, not what should be there. Am I right? So, whilst it's a point made, is it really relevant? Is maybe the question I'm asking David.
Well, what you are reviewing is the actual decision, and the decision notice is on page 72 to 73, so that's the clear grounds which were actually refused.
Okay, that firms in my mind exactly that the issue that the missing bit isn't relevant today, although it's relevant in the bigger, wider scale of things, but not for this particular LRB item. Anyone else? No, in that case then we'll go to item 7, which is the relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, pages 77 to 213. John?
Yeah, thank you. On page 189, in the paragraph 3.3.2, about 2/3 of the way down, there's a statement here that says it can be difficult to design for modern lifestyle without extensively modifying the original building fabric, which in this case was to extend the roof height. And if it's being refused, I think the planning authority is being unreasonable with not putting sufficient enough weight on that particular part of the statement.
Again, I don't know if that's a question or a statement, John. They'll come in when we're in session. Okay. No, I don't think there's any comment in terms of clarity. This end, it's a statement of how you're viewing it. Anyone else? Now, this is A. Normally, we'd have the photos of application site and locality 215 to 221. Reason we put them at the beginning, of course, is that means then you can refer to them as you were going through from 1 to 8. So technically, there again, if you want to see them, but it's the pictures in the paper, photographs in the paper. Okay, so that's really just a statement of fact from me. So 8A is the grounds of refusal. The proposal is contrary to the provisions of the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, OP2, and supplementary guidance on conversion of traditional agricultural properties, in that the design of the proposal, which includes significant raising of the eaves of the original building, is not considered sympathetic to character and appearance of the existing agricultural building. Okay, is there any comment on A1? It's pretty much a statement of fact, actually. Here we are. So in A, then in the grounds of refusal, B, and which is in page 14, is the requested method of determination, which is set out in page 14. And just for clarity, on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only with no further procedure, that's what the applicants asked for. Yep. Okay, so again, that's a statement of fact. And then the grounds stated in the notice of review are pages 11 to 26. And again, I don't think I'm required to actually read out exactly 1, 2, and 3 because everybody's got. But every planning application should be considered its own merits. Should also be transparent throughout the region when making decisions. This has not been the case. The planning officer has not given consideration to the adjoining 2-storey building, thus the surrounding cluster of mixed-use buildings. Then, 2, the application is approved. Both a bat and barn owl survey and structural survey will be undertaken and submitted. The planning officer does not mention from email communication that a structural survey will be undertaken once planning permission has been approved and will form part of the building warrant application. The planning officer further states in the report on handling that although neglected for some time, the building did not appear to have any significant defects, and as a building of traditional construction and formed with close association with the adjacent farm buildings, the proposed site is certainly considered worthy of retention. Okay, I'm just going through them here unless you've got comments to kind of make, and then at 3, sorry. Ian?
No, just something you said, Chairman, there. You mentioned about the raising of the ridge height was considered not sympathetic to the building, and that was a statement of fact. It's maybe a statement of fact that the reporting officer said that, but it's not. It's a statement of opinion of the officer.
By that I meant that the notice was a statement of fact. That is what we've got. Okay, whether we agree with it or not is a different matter. Yeah. So it's either news or false news, isn't it? Right. So that's what I meant by that. So nothing to contrary. So if you're okay, I'll continue at 4.9. That's 3 and 4.9 of the report on handling. The planning officer does not mention the adjoining 2-storey building, thus the surrounding cluster of mixed-use buildings. The proposal to increase the eaves of the single-storey building by 1.3 metres would still be 1 metre lower. No. These are the grounds that are in pages 11 to 26. Yeah, because this is the way the process, and I'm reading out from here. This is the notice. This is the applicant's agent is putting things forward. This is their chance to put something to us without actually speaking.
The clerk read all that.
I know that, yeah, but I mean, this is already, that's what I said, it's already been read out to you. but I wasn't getting, yeah, that's okay, we'll move on, so I've started to read it. Because the last thing we want is here is for the applicant not to have a fair crack at the whip. And it comes with the clerk's notes and the chair's notes. So then, I mean, if you're of a mind that the 4, 5 and 6 are taken as read because they've already been agreed, and then the applicant has also provided comments relative to the case in pages 23 to 24. Okay, no questions on that. Then D is further comments by interested parties. That's from Scottish Water 35 to 38. The Roads Planning Team 39 to 40. The comments of appointed officer are in 43 to 45. There's further comments from applicant's agent on page 49. And then comments of the ornithologist are on pages 51 to 53.
Sorry, Chair. Could I go back to page 49? As I clearly stated earlier, about the meeting with the case officer and the discussion that was taking place, and they clearly, obviously, their statement saying that they followed, all the recommendations from the case officer. Is there any clarification that could enable us to make a decision later on that this was the case?
I'm really unable to assist with that other than just to point out the obvious, which is that the case officer would clearly have identified what the council's policy was, and part of your development plan is in the supplementary guidance, which basically very clearly says about the building up of eaves, so was looking for that to be removed entirely. The entire issue with this is that you've effectively got a modest single-storey building that you're seeing up there where the applicant wishes to put another floor in there, and it's the knock-on effect to the traditional design. So certainly some amendments were made. They did reduce it from 1.5 metres raising to 1.3. That's clear in the amended drawings which are online, and there were some other alterations to the fenestration, things like that. But it is quite clear from the comments that I've seen here, just in the papers, that the full requests weren't acceded to, that the applicant wanted it considered as submitted, and that's what happened.
Okay, so we've done the further comments by interested parties. The local development plan policies, page 30, we okay with that, I take it? Material and considerations include Scottish Planning Policy SPP June 2014 and the proposed local development plan January 2018. Okay, right, so I think that moves us forward for the main issues for the local review body to consider, and that's one, does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies? In particular, does the principle of the development accord to the terms of policy H3 and the related supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside and the conversion of traditional and agricultural properties? Is a structural survey required to establish the acceptability of the proposed building in principle? Okay, that's the first bullet point. Yeah, the second one, does the proposal confirm with the relevant development plan policies relating to siting and design for this type of development, i.e. LDP policies OP1, OP2, and supplementary guidance, design quality of new development, housing in the countryside, and conversion of traditional agricultural properties? Fundamentally, is the proposal sympathetic to the character and appearance of the existing agricultural building? And then the last bullet point is, if the proposal is considered not to conform with the relevant development plan, policy and adopted supplementary guidance, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? Okay. Right, so that's kind of position where we are. We've kind of agreed, we've gone through and looked at all the evidence. So I've outlined the documents within the members' papers. It now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that no representation from any party will be heard today. So the question is, do we think we have sufficient information?
I personally have sufficient information to proceed with the review.
I think this is where we ask everybody to switch their mic on and say yes. It means yes or no, whatever. I'll just go around the table. Ian first.
Yes, sir.
Say yes.
Likewise.
Ronnie, yes. John?
I still say no, because going back to page 43, it says that in anticipation of receiving a favourable outcome in regards to the application, that recommendations were made, and I don't even know what these recommendations were. So if what David's saying is that the applicant decided to go against those, again, I haven't got a statement in here to say otherwise. I haven't got any papers in here to say otherwise. So I don't know if I can make that judgment.
I think that's your position. Okay. Last to me, I think, yes, we have got enough information to do it today. John, there's a remedy for you outside the meeting today. You know, I think you should use that. Possibly something we can discuss at the end of the LRB business today with David and getting the fullest information. But I don't want to cut across the process here because it's absolutely crucial. This is a process-driven review. If you can, David, yeah.
It's really just to basically go back to square one as to what this process is. I mean, it's in the title, it's a notice of review to the local review body. You're reviewing the decision that was made, not the process as to how it got there, what was amended or anything like this. You have a set of drawings in your papers that were refused. That's what was considered. So it's really that and that alone that you're looking at. And all the arguments as to did they amend it, were they requested this, to a large degree that's immaterial. You have a set of drawings that were refused. You've got a reason for refusal. It's then up to the LRB to actually go back and build that up. Is it, you know, to look at what was actually the grounds for refusal by the appointed officer? Does it accord with the development plan? Are there any material considerations? I mean, it's really a twofold process. One, was there any process issue? Then secondly, was the appointed officer correct in their assessment of the policies? Were the material considerations applied correctly in the conclusion they came to? So, as I say, to a large degree, what did or didn't happen in the background is irrelevant because you have a decision before you that's already been made.
Okay, well, we're for an abstention or whatever you want, or against if that's what it is, that we have sufficient information, so we'll move forward in the process. Now, the options available to us are to request further information, resolve to hold a hearing, resolve to hold a site visit, but we would not come to that until we've been in session. So I think we're now in session, aren't we? It's an open discussion now, David.
Just to also make the obvious comment that one decision you can do is uphold the original.
Yes, well, I haven't come round to what we can actually do or not do. I've only come to what the thing are. Yeah, but I take your point. Yes, obviously we can uphold. So I think we're in session. Open discussion now.
Sorry to harp on about this, but I'm going back to the structural survey part, where I can understand that it may be best practice, that in cases of a permitted development, it obviously doesn't come through the planning process, and that would be covered by a building warrant. Equally, David's advice was if we were minded to approve it, we should go to further procedures to request a structural survey. Being told that our decision today has to be based on the reasons for refusal, and the reasons for refusal is contrary to OP2, not the absence of a structural survey. So I think that might be a bit punitive, by actually extending it again. I think it's down to an interpretation of the fact of whether the ridge height is sympathetic or not. In my own personal view, in this particular case, I think it is sympathetic. The examples that are given next to it bear no resemblance to the building itself. The one with the wraparound, I think you mentioned it was a ridge height. I'd actually hadn't picked that out correctly, that had been increased. But the parent building, or the building next to it, is already a higher ridge. So it's although it's raising the one in the application site, it's to below the level of the adjoining property. But they're quite happy to hear other members' and views on that one.
Okay. Anyone else? John?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been interesting having that photo of the present state of the building with us all the way. I mean, as my colleague on my left said on page 189, it's extremely difficult to transform a traditional building like that into a three-bedroom family home without doing something fairly extensive. In this case, it's raising the ridge house height. And Councillor Blake also talked about matters of opinion, whether it's something sympathetic or not to the surrounding building group is a matter for individual perceptions. And I think this conversion to convert a disused building, which will probably deteriorate further pretty quickly unless something major is done, into a modern three-bedroom home for a young family who want to stay and work in this particular area. I think I am not sympathetic to the original decision, and I believe this conversion is acceptable and does conform to the present development plan.
David, can you come in? Yeah.
Sorry, I have to intervene here. I don't think you could possibly say it conforms to the development plan, because your conversion supplementary guidance forms part of your development plan and clearly identifies a diagram that shows that raising the ridge height is unacceptable. So the fundamental problem you've got here is that a modest property, somebody wants to make it into a three-bedroom one, it doesn't comply with the development plan. There's a diagram that shows that if you wish to have it as an exception to policy, then obviously you've got to make the case as to why, what the material considerations are that would justify that.
John?
Thank you, Chair. It's not often I would disagree, but I do disagree this time, because the diagram shows a standalone building. That clearly is not a standalone building. I don't think that type of conversion is covered anywhere that I could see within the guidance.
I would just refer members to page 43 with the appointed officer's comments about that, where in paragraph 2 he says the key issue here is the raising of the eaves oblique roof height, which fundamentally alters the original proportions. This policy applies to conversion of all traditional agricultural buildings, whether detached or semi-detached, isolated or integrated.
Anyone else? Ian?
Yeah, again, going back to that photograph, that to make that building, to allow that building to be habitable, there would need to be an increase in ridge height, because of even if the door height. I mean, I'm 5'9". I'd struggle to get inside some of these. Which would show the case that a level of increase in ridge height is acceptable. What we're talking about is the varying degrees of it, whether it be by half a metre or 1.3 metres. So I think that part of it is subjective. Sorry, that was more of a statement than a question, but I'd like to ask David's views on that.
I think it is more a statement. And David kind of looked at me and I went, that's a statement, but have you any comment there?
Yeah, well, basically your policies in the development plan under H3 allow for the conversion of a traditional building. There's then supplementary guidance, which also forms part of the development plan, that explains the circumstances which that would be acceptable. So obviously you're looking to retain the character of the traditional building. This building is such a modest building that I don't think anybody in the appointed officer has said in his report or in the decision that a conversion isn't acceptable. But the concern is the degree of intervention which is proposed, which will alter the character of it. And just to come back to your other issue that you raised earlier about the structural survey, there is obviously a risk that if works proceed and it's then found to not be structurally sound and say it collapses during the construction, then that permission has actually gone. So you've got no way of knowing whether or not that is going to be the case, because the planning permission would only be for the conversion of the building, not for a new build.
Okay, so if I've got that right then, so if the mind was to say, yes, this is okay, and someone was to happen, then they would have to start all over again, basically, is what you're saying.
What is normally done by your planning department is that they attach a directive that just makes it clear that the permission is granted on the basis of the conversion and the change of use of the existing property only, and any loss or demolition of the existing building basically means that permission is gone, because H3 only allows the conversion, not the flattening of the building and then the complete rebuilding. So that basically if the building fell down during the construction, then they would have nothing. The permission would be extinguished.
Okay, so I think I make sense of that. So if the JCB dig in the ditch on the side, we should knock the corner of the building down, start from scratch again. Basically, wouldn't it, if it was if the whole thing then tumbled down?
If it did, and also H3 doesn't support the erection of new houses here, it's only the conversion. So there is a risk to yourselves in approving this without a structural survey, because you don't know what you'd actually be approving.
Okay, but there's also a risk to the applicant. Absolutely. So who's has got the greatest risk, I think, is the question. Okay, is anybody else got any comment? I think in that case...
Chairman, sorry, can I just very briefly...
Sorry,
it's on the same point. It's just to make sure that I'm absolutely sure of that. I can understand the risk aspect of it that David mentioned. Is that risk on the planning authority, or is that risk on the applicant?
As a competent planning authority, you would want to ensure that what you're actually approving is capable of being converted, and you're not letting yourself into an awkward position where the building then falls down halfway through construction. It has happened, and I have seen ones where even a structural survey will come in and they'll still find problems halfway through. So it's not the panacea, but at least it gives the comfort to the planning authority that it is something that is likely to accord with your own policies.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Have we finished then? I have a couple of questions for David just in this. And so, in terms of clarity for us, David, if we were of a mind, for example, to vary the determination, that would be done through further procedures or a directive. Would that be right?
You have a number of options now. You can, if you're in agreement with the original decision, I mean, again, it's probably worth just going back and taking a step through it. If the appointed officer has considered things properly in accordance with your development plan, then almost the default position would be to uphold that original decision. If you're satisfied that the correct policies have been applied, then you should really be refusing this. If you have some, say, reservations about, you think something could be done but maybe not this, similarly, you should uphold the original decision, and the applicant has an opportunity to resubmit another application, which they could either make further amendments or resubmit all the information that wasn't included with the original application that was before the appointed officer. If you don't agree with, If you're happy to make an exception to policy, then obviously I would suggest that the clerk needs to hear the reasons why and make a ruling as to whether or not they're competent. If that is the case, then the next step would really be for you to decide if you're going to further procedures, such as, do you want to visit it? Do you want to get a structural survey? Do you need a hearing? I would suggest that probably a hearing isn't appropriate in as far as even the applicant's not requested that. So maybe discounting that one, that I would suggest are the options for your way forward.
Okay then. We're getting to a stage here, I think, where we've heard everything that there is to hear, we've seen everything there is to see, and I think we're at decision time, and whatever that decision might be, we need it backed up by the reasons why you compelled that decision.
Thank you, Chair. David said there we could request a structural survey as part of a decision. Is that correct?
Yes, you would need to decide that you're going not to make a decision today, but you'd be looking for further procedures. And under the guidance on how to run a local review body, it's open to you to do that. You can ask for further information. You've got to specify who's got to provide it and the timescale that you'd expect it to come back. You would then have a further meeting when you had that information. So say in this instance you felt it was necessary to get a structural survey, then what would happen is the administration would write to the applicant's agent stating what the view was and the timescales. You get that information back and then you'd convene a further meeting. And from that decide if you had enough information, whether you're willing to go with it or not.
Ian?
Is there an inference now on our determination in that case if we ask for a structural survey? We're hardly likely to ask for a structural survey in something that we may be considering going with the recommendation.
In the same way that reports are put to your planning applications committee, if they're going up for refusal because it's a clear refusal, then it's not sought for various costly surveys to be done unless and until the view of the planning applications committee is that it wants to support it. In the same way here, you would be tacitly, if you were looking for a structural survey, you'd be tacitly saying it is something that you're at least considering.
In that case, can I formally move that we go to further procedures and request a structural survey?
And any seconder? Any counter? First thing, here's your first big decision, Tracy. Is that confident? I think what David said it is. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, obviously what members have agreed is to adjourn this item for a structural survey to be submitted, and it will come back to another local review panel, and then you will go through the process again of determining whether you have enough information to then go to the further procedures.
Just for clarity, it's the same 5 councillors. Yeah, so we've heard the evidence,
same 5 members.
Okay, thank you. So are we agreed we're going to ask for a structural survey? And David, take it you take that forward through your department? Yeah?
I'll pass that back to the local review body administration, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay then. I've actually got a wee problem. Right, okay, when we're, can we just hear the decision of the LRB, please? Yeah, thank you. Excuse me, guys, one meeting.
Item 5. Yeah. So item 5 now is Butterdales road site adjacent to Daleside, Eastriggs, refusal of planning permission for alterations, erection of extensions and change of use of office building storage area to form dwelling house with integral garage, reference 180033 FUL. Again, within your papers you have your notice of review, your report on handling, observations of the appointed officer and any other interested parties, planning application form, the decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council, extracts of the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, and photos of the application site. The grounds for refusal are that the change of use of the building approved as an office under planning reference 06P40032 and associated storage yard to residential use is contrary to the provisions of Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan Policy H3, which permits new housing in the countryside only in the special circumstances identified, and none of these circumstances apply. The proposal does not relate to the conversion of a traditional building, and it would not result in beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site, and that the site does not seriously detract from the visual and environmental amenity of the area. The applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. And the grounds stated in the notice of review in summary are: 1. It is respectfully requested that the local review body examine paragraph 4.5 of the report on handling further. It is contended that it is not acceptable to refuse on the grounds in this instance it is not considered that the proposed site has been significantly degraded by former activity to be considered as a suitable site for redevelopment. There is no contention that this site should be classified as rural brownfield. However, the report fails to recognise the following, taken from PAN 73, Rural Diversification, February 2005. The conversion and reuse of the existing buildings on rural brownfield sites should always be the first option. This guidance statement is no way caveated to having the potential to seriously detract from the visual and environmental amenity. 2. PAN 73 encourages the rehabilitation of brownfield sites in rural areas, defining these sites as being either occupied by redundant or unused buildings, or land that has been significantly degraded by a former activity. It is suggested that the report on handling is slightly skewed, such that it has not reflected the true spirit of the guidance. The conversion and reuse of the existing buildings on brownfield sites should always be the first option. 3. Supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside also provides that the conversion and reuse of the existing buildings on rural brownfield sites should always be the first option. See page 391. The report on handling at 4.6 provides that the site, as noted above, remains disused. 4. From the support and supplementary guidance, the site is clearly a brownfield site, as quite simply the land has been previously developed. The site is occupied by redundant or unused buildings. To meet the definition, only one aspect is necessary, as the guidance uses the term or, and the appointed officer does not dispute this. It is respectfully contended that the LDP policy H3 guidance permits that this brownfield site should have the change of use application granted, as the guidance clearly states without caveat that the conversion and reuse of the existing buildings on rural brownfield land should always be the first option. You then have your further comments by interested parties, a list of your development plan policies, and the main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies? In particular, does the principle of the development accord with the terms of policy H3 and the related supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside and the conversion of traditional agricultural properties? Specifically, does the proposal relate to the conversion of a traditional building, or would it result in beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site? If the proposal is considered not to conform with the relevant development plan policies and adopted supplementary guidance, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? Having outlined the documents with members, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. The local review body has the same options outlined in the previous item, so if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I'll ask the chairman to lead the debate.
Thanks very much. We've got the pictures, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. These are the same slides that you have in your papers. The first set were taken at the time of the case officer's site visit. So this is looking down the road towards Eastriggs with the site on the right. And that's where it abuts the neighbouring Daleside riding arena. Looking across the application site. And that's the main entrance into both Daleside there, and that's the entrance to the application site. Just looking from Daleside just to the, so you're seeing on here is the wall of the property, you just see the edge of the roof. It's within the site now. That's its condition as of May this year. And the property that's there, I noted in the report that although permission was granted in 2006 for an office building, the roof ridge was, the roof pitch I should say, was changed without permission, and the porch was added, so it's not been built in accordance with the 2006 permission, but it's obviously beyond the point at which any enforcement action could be taken. Just moving round from the far end of the site looking down across the site, so it's worthy of note just what the condition was in May this year of the site. It's the edge with the boundary and looking towards the gate in the road. It's just a view through the window of the interior of the building. Now, these were photos taken at the time of, you'll note there was a previous local review body decision, 2015, so it was taken at the time of that decision. So looking up and down the road, Daleside Arena. If anything, I note there was more vegetation in the site at that point than in November 2014 than there was in May this year. Very similar set of photos, really. The quality of the photos are not as good back in 2010, but that was the time of the first application that was also refused. Again, apologies for the blurry nature of them, but it does give you a flavour for what was in the site at that time.
Thank you. Again, we'll go through the same process. We'll go to one notice of review dated 29th of August 2018 on pages 227 to 237. Have we any questions? No. And we'll go on to 2, report on handling and related correspondence, 239 to 261. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on page 243. I see the application was subjected by the Community Council. If this was a Community Council objection, why did this not come to the Planning Authority and there'll be a delegated decision?
Under your scheme of delegation, it only requires to come to committee if there's an objection from a statutory consultee and the officers are recommending approval. If officers are refusing and there's an objection from a statutory consultee, it's effectively doing what the statutory consultee wanted, so it doesn't need to come to committee.
Just on the same subject, I can't help but notice who the agent is. Why does this no come to planning? Because, is Roland this?
Good point. For clarity, that probably would have been a better process. There were a number of applications recently which did come forward just because of the contentious nature of them. But yeah, fair point.
He's often contentious, right enough. I shouldn't have switched my mic on when I said that. Anybody else got any questions on 2? John?
Was there a completion certificate issued for the original office building?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I would doubt it.
Anybody else in 2? Okay, in that case, we'll go to 3, observations of the appointed officer. That's in 263 to 269. Nope. 4, planning application form submitted on the 11th of January. Associated plans and supporting information, 271 to 287. Nope. Decision letter from the council dated 31st of May, pages 289 to 296. Nope. 6, relevant extracts from the local development plan, pages 297 to 451. John?
Yeah, just for a bit of clarification, Chair, policy H3 on page 388, it says that the council will support housing proposals in the countryside where the proposals meet one or more of the following criteria. And I think that this is a brownfield site, is that correct?
It is a brownfield site, but more clarification is given on that elsewhere in this set of papers.
We can cover that later, John. Yep. Seven's obviously the photos in the locality that we'd looked at. John?
Yeah, some of the black and white photographs are not very clear.
Okay, sorry, I'm not going to reread the grounds for refusal, but that's on page 293. You okay to take that as read? The requested method of determination in 232, it's quite clear as well. Happy to take that as read. Thank you. Okay, we then move on to C, ground stated notice of review. Are there any questions there in either one? Item 2. Item 3. And item 4. It also goes on and under D, comments of the Community Council on pages 249 to 250. Comments to the Road Planning Team, 251 to 252. Comments to Scottish Water, 253 to 256. Comments to the Objector from 4 the Crescent Eastriggs are in 257 to 258 and also in page 269. The comment of the objector, Daleside, B&B for horses, on pages 259 and 261. And comments of the appointed officer are on pages 267 to 269. And moving on to E, the development plan policies on page 244 are as read. The other material considerations are the proposed local development plan 2 and Scottish planning policy. So the main issues for the LRB to consider: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies? In particular, does the principle of the development accord with the terms of policy H3 and the related supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside and the conversion of traditional agricultural properties? Specifically, does the proposal relate to the conversion of a traditional building, or would it result in beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site? It's the first consideration. And then the second one is if the proposal is considered not to conform with the relevant development plan policies and adopted supplementary guidance, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? Okay, so having outlined the documents within the members' papers, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that no representations from any party will be heard today. So the question again is, round the table, do we have sufficient to come to a conclusion? Ian?
Yes for me.
Yes.
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 And myself, yes. Okay, so that then takes us to in session, basically. Yep, discussion. We know what the things are, the remedies available to us to either support, not support, and or amend. I think is to paraphrase what the options are. So I'm throwing it open to members here for discussion. John?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm looking at policy H3 again. I see in the refusal letter, it says that policy H3, which permits new housing, there's no reference about it being H3 in brownfield development. And on page 388, where it gives a bit more information on brownfield development, especially rural brownfield sites on page 392. It also includes the guidance of PAN 73, rural diversification, and it states that a development plan policy should encourage rehabilitation of brownfield sites in rural areas and defines these as sites that are occupied by redundant or unused buildings, which this clearly is, or land that has been significantly degraded. Well, that's the land that's degraded. There's no mention about the actual buildings being degraded. I fully appreciate further along on page 393 that not every rural brownfield site is appropriate. And there's a statement at the bottom of that paragraph which says the council will not regard recent structures, i.e. those erected within the last 25 years and thereafter from the date this policy is adopted. But it also says in the same paragraph that where there is no realistic prospect of them being returned to agricultural land or woodland, well, I would argue that there's no way that this could be agricultural or woodland. It was an ex-council piece of land, and I would imagine it'd be contamination, at the very least, that would have to be dealt with before you could even turn it into agricultural. So I can see there's a clear need for this. I understand the 25-year structures recently been built within 25 years, but it's already been sitting empty, derelict. It's a haven for, anybody that could come along, smash windows, druggies might use it. It really could end up being an eyesore. And I would suggest that if there's a way forward of utilising these structures that are sitting there empty, how long do we leave them empty before we actually bring them back into use? So I would actually argue and say that the H3 policy, all the mention is that they're talking about permits new housing in the countryside only by special circumstances. There's not even a mention of the brownfield element in H3 here, which I don't think the officers gave sufficient enough weight. So therefore, I would say that this particular building could be utilised, brought back into use, rather than leaving it for another 10, 12, well, it's been 12 years since I think it had permission, sat empty since 2006, I believe. And we're going to leave it for another 10, 12 years. How long do we leave it to practically falling down around us and people complaining it's a complete eyesore? So I completely think that it should be encouraged to be rehabilitated and it should be brought back into use. It's a redundant and unused building. But I'm happy to hear other members' views.
Okay. Anyone else? John?
I remember being advised when considering building groups and planning decisions, etc., we have to look at the situation as it is now. And I know the planning history is quite interesting in this particular development. But I do agree that this seems to boil down on the definition of a brownfield site. And I was pleased that David immediately said, yes, this is a brownfield site. So that's been clearly clarified. The other thing is, if it's a brownfield site, has it fallen into disuse? Well, it obviously has. It's lain empty for years. So it's a brownfield site that's fallen into disuse. So is this a beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site that's fallen into disuse? And I would agree with my colleague, I think it is. And there's no point waiting another 10 years before it can be considered for planning permission.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I mean, I have to emphasise I agree entirely with what has been said by the last two members. I think this building has been sitting empty for a long, long time, actually, and I think this is a process we could use now to redevelop it and bring it back into use again.
Okay. Any of you, Ian?
Nothing to add that's already been said.
Okay, I'm just picking up on what the agent said. And it's on page 391. Our papers, the supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside always provides that the conversion and reuse of existing buildings on rural brownfield sites should always be the first option. And I would tend to agree with that. Particularly when there's no doubt it would appear that it is a brownfield site and it's been sitting empty for a long, long time. So I'm in members' hands now. Have we finished with questions? Finished meeting session, yeah. So it's then up to us now to decide whether we uphold the original decision of the planning officer, or we amend it, or we basically overturn it and award planning permission. I think that's right terminology, David, isn't it?
Grant, yes, rather than award.
Yeah.
The key thing, which I would obviously, I was staying quiet there, but the the supplementary guidance, which is part of your development plan, clearly requires it to remove dereliction. Now, if you look on page 266, the appointed officer makes it clear that it is neglected, it's acknowledged it is a brownfield site, brownfield being land that has previously been developed, but it couldn't really be described as derelict. It's in a reasonable condition as wind and watertight and could readily be occupied as an office. It clearly doesn't meet the 25-year rule in your local development plan, and there have been 3 previous refusals, including one which was upheld by the local review body under the current local development plan in 2015. So what has changed is the key question. I think you'd have to demonstrate why you're making an exception to policy. What do you consider is the justification for making an exception, and what has changed in the interim?
John?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this, it was an office. It was going to be a caravan storage facility. It's never been used since it got that application approved. It's sat there empty. There's been no attempt of anybody else wishing to take over a brownfield site for any kind of commercial, or we would be aware of that, especially through the planning system. So how long do we hold on to a redundant building? It may not be derelict in the sense that you see some farm buildings, because they can clearly demonstrate that they're falling around your ears. But in this instance, yes, I totally agree with David's analysis of the 25-year rule, or because of a structure that's been built within 25 years. But I mean, 25 years waiting for a building that could, or a piece of land that could be utilised and brought back into use, albeit not a brownfield site, but certainly as a habitable property. Are we really seriously saying, as a local authority or a planning authority, that we're quite happy to see these structures being vandalised, to sit empty, to become a magnet for all sorts of things for the next 12 years, 25 years, or whatever it may be? I seriously think that we need to sort of make an exception here and say, this is a building, it can be brought back into use. It will never be a commercial site in the sense that we see elsewhere. So therefore, I honestly think that we should approve the application and allow this to go ahead.
I think that's a statement side. I'm not sure. You asked the question of what's changed from the last LRB. I would suggest 3 years has passed. Nothing's happened.
There is obviously under your local development plan a requirement for other sites. For example, if somebody is wanting to remove an allocated business and industrial site for some other use, then you have to demonstrate that it's been marketed for a reasonable period of time, at least a year. Now, that isn't analogous directly to this, but it would be interesting to know what marketing there had been to try and find an alternative use, or whether this was, if you like, the game plan from the outset.
Remind me what our old wise old owl from Newton Stewart used to say about guidance being there to help, not to enslave. Is this one of these perfect examples of what Mr. Gerrish used to talk about?
Well, clearly it is open to yourselves as the LRB to make a different decision. Yeah. You would have to, as I said earlier, that's fine, that's within your remit, but I think you would have to clearly state why it was an exception to policy, and I think Councillor Campbell started to articulate it, that really it's the length of time that this has sat there vacant, and I don't think you can make a case that it's all other alternative uses have been exhausted, because as far as I'm aware, certainly there's no information I could see in the papers here to demonstrate it had been actively marketed for somebody else to come and buy it. So it has sat there with the same owner or developer. It was a different applicant, I noticed, in 2006 to the current applicant, but it never has been used for the originally approved purpose.
So just for clarity, David, then, so if one of the reasons for the exception to current policy is that it's already been the subject of an LRB and then a further 3 years have passed, and there's still no change in the circumstances, and we now have someone who wants to develop it, the brownfield site, into a house in the countryside, because whether we agree Eastriggs is the countryside or not, but you take my point, because we it's one of our priorities in actual fact is to encourage regeneration of the rural areas.
Indeed, the only comment to make is that people have been seeking since 2010 to make this into a house, so it's hardly something that somebody has just emerged to save this derelict building. Because again, it isn't derelict. It's not, from the photos I've seen, showing any signs of vandalism. And in fact, as you saw from the slides, it's actually in a slightly better state now than it was in 2014 in the site. But as I say, as long as you've got reasonable grounds for why you would be making an exception to policy, that's really all I'm sure the clerk would be looking for to be minuted.
So just to give your advice on David, because obviously it's crucial how this is worded. You're absolutely right in that. So if it's been available for industrial purposes for how many years did he say? 8, was it?
The original permission was granted in 2006, although I understand that it's never actually been used for the purpose that it was originally granted.
So it's been lying unused for that purpose since for 12 years. So could we take the reasonable position that we think that's too long and it's time to actually allow it to be developed as something else? Would that be competent in your view?
Sorry. I would pass that. I'm here to advise. It's up to the clerk.
Sorry, and your advice then, because I'm sure she's listening to you as well, right? Would your advice be to say yes, that was something we could put in terms of competency to the clerk?
You clearly have had a vacant building sitting there, not doing anything constructive for a rather long period of time. Where it is obviously contrary to policy is that we haven't actually teased out what other alternative uses have been explored, has it been marketed, etc. So certainly you have a history there of the same proposal since 2010 being repeatedly submitted. If you consider that in the intervening period since the last LRB decision 4 years ago, it's the fact that there's no change has come along, no alternative use has been demonstrated, that it's now is the time to allow this to be put to some beneficial use rather than sitting there.
Okay, I think that makes it clearer in our mind. I think now just put it to the other 4 members what you think the remedy should be here. Ian?
I noted what David mentioned earlier, and I could see the point that that it could have been that this might have been the game plan and initially. I think if that was the case, 12 years they've been extremely patient in it. I think it's had its run, it's had its chance to be a brownfield site, and it's obviously not feasible. And I would put it as an exception to policy with the correct wording, which might be more difficult.
Okay, because I'm just really aware of another planning decision that was taken where we gave somebody 6 months to prove that they'd been marketing it properly. A clear difference for all these years. Ronnie, what's your view?
I would just say I would back the proposal actually, Chair, on this one.
John?
Yes, I fully agree with my colleagues. I think I reverse the decision on the grounds that it's a brownfield site falling into disuse and it can be redeveloped. But the exception to policy because of the length of time it's remained unused.
I think we'll use our analytical friend here to get the wording, because I'm getting the feeling here we're all agreeing. John?
Yeah, I've already said enough, Chair.
Well, there's no politician.
No, I honestly think that we should bring these things in, into some kind of use. If the option was there for a brownfield site or a commercial enterprise, that would be great, but 12 years, is it going to be another 12 years? How long do we wait until the actual building that's there begins to fall down?
Okay then. I'm of mind we should overturn and as well. It's just getting the wording right, David. So are you allowed to advise, or you're pushing it straight back to the governance officer? Right,
I think
right, come on,
I'll summarise and then David can confirm if it's suitable. So LRB are looking to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve as an exception to policy on the grounds that this has already been the subject of a previous local review body and that this building has been vacant for a significant amount of time, and this proposal will be a beneficial use of a brownfield site.
I'm not sure I would make mention of the previous
Local
review body. It's just the fact that it has sat vacant since it was constructed, or since it got planning permission in 2006.
And is there any conditions that members would like to attach?
I would suggest the normal conditions that would normally be worked out between the planners and the thing. Would that be fair to do, or do you have to be more specific here, David?
The decision has already been made by officers under delegated powers, so you are the final decision-making body. So you cannot defer to officers to attach conditions. Here's one I prepared earlier in anticipation. Taking a combination of the road's recommended conditions, it really just does fall down to 5 conditions of roads and then 2 directives, I would suggest. I can read them out verbatim if you want, but in summary, it's to do with the formation of the access, with a lay-by being required, which is one of the things roads required, with the various dimensions on that. You would also need the access at a junction to be made 4 metres wide by 5 metres perpendicular to the public road, in accordance with a lay-by of condition 1, and then you'd have access gradient of 8%, trapping and draining so water doesn't flow onto the public road, and any access gate would have to be no closer than 5 metres to the public road. Then you would have conditions regarding the visibility, and then requirement that nothing over 1 metre in height fall within those visibility displays, and that the parking and turning areas would have to be formed within the site. And standard directives would be 3 years for the time validity of the planning permission, and then the need to get in touch with the road network team for a road opening permit and for the formation of the lay-by. So I can pass those to the clerk, but that's the conditions I would suggest that you actually attach to any permission.
Ian?
Just to say that David just took the words from my mouth. That was about what I was going to...
I'd say, well done, you guys, for coming up with that. So are we happy with that? Can you just read out then, Stacey, what we've got?
So it's reversing the decision of the appointed officer, approving the application as an exception to policy on the grounds that there's been a building vacant since construction in 2006, and this proposal would be a beneficial use of a brownfield site, and you're also attaching the 5 conditions and directives as suggested by the planning advisor.
Okay. Thanks very much. I don't have any other business, but what I think I just would like just to finish, because remember there was a couple of issues, put one in the first report, and then the question I asked about if it's a councillor's an agent, why does it not have to come to full planning committee? I think maybe some clarification on that, David, because I think it's a grey area, isn't it?
Close the meeting first.
Well, we are. I've closed the meeting. Yeah, yeah. The meeting's closed anyway. But I'd said that. I thought, yeah, the meeting. No other business.